The dusty trail stretched endlessly before Beatrice Emerson as her wagon rattled into Idaho City in the summer heat of 1878, carrying everything she owned and a heart that had been broken 3 times over. She was 32 years old, worn down by loss but not defeated, her auburn hair tied back in a practical bun, her calico dress faded from too many washings and too many tears. The gold rush had long since peaked in this Idaho Territory town, but it still held on to life with stubborn determination, much like Beatrice herself. She had come here seeking nothing more than honest work and a fresh start, somewhere nobody knew her history, somewhere she could breathe without the weight of pitying stares following her every move. The mercantile was hiring, according to the newspaper advertisement she had carefully cut out and carried folded in her pocket for 3 weeks. She pulled her wagon to a stop outside the weathered building, her hands trembling slightly as she climbed down. The streets were busy with afternoon traffic, miners and cowboys and respectable townspeople going about their business under the relentless sun. Beatrice smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and walked through the mercantile door, the bell chiming above her head. Behind the counter stood a portly man with spectacles who introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, the owner. He looked her over with the practiced eye of someone who had seen plenty of desperate souls come through his establishment. Beatrice stood tall despite her exhaustion, meeting his gaze directly. She needed this position. Her savings had dwindled to almost nothing during the journey here. "I am a hard worker," she said firmly. "I can keep accounts, manage inventory, and I have experience with customers. I do not complain, I do not gossip, and I am reliable." Mr. Henderson seemed impressed by her directness. "You married? Got a husband who might take issue with you working?" "I am widowed," Beatrice replied, which was technically true of her first marriage. The other 2 situations were more complicated, but she saw no reason to elaborate. "I have no one depending on me, and no one to interfere with my work." He hired her on the spot, offering a modest wage and pointing her toward the boarding house 2 streets over where she might find affordable lodging. Beatrice felt the tight knot in her chest loosen slightly. This was a beginning, at least. She could build something from this. The boarding house was run by a stern but fair woman named Mrs. Cooper, who showed Beatrice to a small room on the 2nd floor. It contained a narrow bed, a washstand, a small dresser, and a window that overlooked the street. It was sparse but clean, and Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes at the simple mercy of having a place to call her own, however temporary. She unpacked her few belongings, washed the road dust from her face and hands, and allowed herself to sit on the bed for just a moment, her shoulders sagging with relief and exhaustion. She started work the next morning, arriving early to prove her dedication. Mr. Henderson seemed pleased with her punctuality and set her to organizing the fabric section, which had fallen into disarray. Beatrice lost herself in the familiar rhythm of work, sorting bolts of cloth by color and type, noting which items needed reordering. Customers came and went, and she helped them with quiet efficiency, learning names and preferences, beginning to weave herself into the fabric of this new community. It was late afternoon on her 3rd day when the cowboy walked in. Beatrice noticed him immediately because he moved with an easy confidence that drew the eye, tall and lean with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His boots struck the wooden floor with a purposeful rhythm as he approached the counter where Beatrice was tallying the day's receipts. "Afternoon," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in the quiet store. "I need supplies for a 2-week trail drive. You got time to help me put together an order?" Beatrice looked up and found herself meeting the greenest eyes she had ever seen, startling in their intensity against his tanned face. For a moment, she forgot how to speak, which was ridiculous. She was a grown woman, not some silly girl to be flustered by a handsome face. She had been married 3 times, for goodness sake. She knew exactly how charming men could be and exactly how much heartbreak they could cause. "Of course," she managed, reaching for paper and pencil. "What exactly will you need?" They spent the next hour going through his list, and Beatrice found herself enjoying the conversation more than she had expected. His name was Tucker Dalton, he told her, and he worked on the Double R Ranch about 10 miles outside town. He was heading up a cattle drive to Boise and needed enough provisions to keep 6 men fed on the trail. As they talked, Beatrice noted his easy manner, the way he listened carefully to her suggestions about quantities and alternatives, the way his smile reached his eyes when she made a practical joke about cowboys and their coffee. "You new in town?" Tucker asked as she wrapped his order of dried beans. "I have not seen you here before, and I am fairly certain I would have remembered." Beatrice felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "I arrived earlier this week. I am working here at the Mercantile. Where did you come from?" His question was casual, genuinely curious rather than prying. "Colorado," she said, which was true. She had last lived in Colorado, though she had been born in Missouri and lived in Kansas in between. 3 states, 3 marriages, 3 failures. The pattern was becoming embarrassing. "Mining town." "Yes, but the mine closed and there was no reason to stay." Also true, though incomplete. The mine closing had simply given her the excuse she needed to leave to escape the whispers and the memories. Tucker nodded, accepting her explanation without pushing for more. "Idaho City is a good town. People here are decent for the most part. I think you will like it." "I hope so," Beatrice said softly, surprising herself with her honesty. He paid for his supplies and arranged to pick them up the following morning before dawn. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door and looked back at her. "Maybe when I get back from Boise, you would let me buy you dinner at the hotel restaurant. They make a decent steak, and it would be nice to have company." Beatrice's immediate instinct was to refuse. She had not come to Idaho City looking for romance. She had come looking for peace, for a life free from the complications that men brought. But something in Tucker's straightforward manner, the lack of presumption in his invitation, made her hesitate. "Maybe," she heard herself say. "Come back safely first." His smile was like sunrise. "Yes, madam, I will do my best." After he left, Beatrice stood behind the counter feeling oddly unsettled. She had not expected this, had not wanted to feel that flutter of interest in her chest. She had promised herself no more entanglements, no more risking her heart. 3 times had been more than enough. The days passed into weeks, and Beatrice settled into her new life with determined focus. She worked hard at the Mercantile, earned Mr. Henderson's trust, and began to make cautious friendships with other women in town. Mrs. Cooper at the boarding house proved to be a source of town gossip and surprisingly good advice. Sarah, the schoolteacher who lived down the hall, became someone Beatrice could talk to over evening tea. It was a quiet life, but Beatrice found comfort in the routine, in the simple fact of making it through each day without catastrophe. She tried not to think about Tucker Dalton, but she found herself watching the road from the Mercantile window more often than she cared to admit, wondering when he would return from Boise, wondering if he would remember his invitation to dinner, wondering why she cared. It was early September when he finally walked back through the Mercantile door, looking even more dusty and trail-worn than before but grinning broadly when he saw her. "We got a good price for the cattle," he announced. "The boss is happy. The men are celebrating at the saloon, and I am here to collect on that maybe." Beatrice felt her heart skip. "The maybe dinner," he said. "You said maybe you would let me buy you dinner when I got back." "I am back. I am relatively clean despite appearances, and I am very hopeful that maybe has turned into yes." She should say no. She knew she should. But looking at Tucker's hopeful expression, at the genuine warmth in those startling green eyes, she found herself nodding. "Yes. I finish work in an hour." "I will clean up and meet you here," Tucker said, and the joy in his voice made something twist in Beatrice's chest, something she had thought long dead. The hotel restaurant was the nicest establishment in Idaho City, with white tablecloths and actual glassware. Tucker had indeed cleaned up, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a clean shirt and vest that made him look almost formal. He held Beatrice's chair for her, and she felt absurdly nervous as she sat down, smoothing her best dress, which was still nothing fancy but at least had no patches. They ordered steak and potatoes, and as they waited for their food, Tucker asked about her work, about whether she was settling in well, about her impressions of Idaho City. His questions were thoughtful, and he listened to her answers with genuine attention. Beatrice found herself relaxing, laughing at his stories about the trail drive, the mishaps and adventures that came with moving cattle across rough country. "You said you came from Colorado," Tucker said as they ate. "Do you have family there?" The question was innocent, but Beatrice felt herself tense. No family anywhere, really. My parents passed years ago, and I was an only child. That must be lonely." "I am used to it." Beatrice took a sip of water, debating how much to reveal. Tucker had been nothing but kind, but she knew how quickly opinions could change when people learned her history. Still, if he was going to lose interest, better it happen now before she became any more attached. "I was married," she said carefully. "But my husband died 5 years ago in a mining accident." Tucker's expression filled with sympathy. "I am sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was." Beatrice twisted her napkin in her lap. "But life continues, whether we are ready or not." "You seem like someone who faces things head-on," Tucker observed. "That takes strength." If only he knew the whole truth. But Beatrice was not ready to share the complete story, not yet, not when she was barely beginning to feel safe in this new place. She steered the conversation back to Tucker, asking about his work at the ranch, about how he had ended up in Idaho. He told her he had come west from Ohio 7 years ago, looking for adventure and opportunity. He had worked various ranches, saved his money, and hoped to eventually buy his own land, start his own operation. "It is a hard life," he admitted, "but there is something about it that gets into your blood. The freedom, the challenge, the satisfaction of doing work that matters." "I cannot imagine going back to city life now." Beatrice understood that sentiment. Despite everything she had been through, she felt the same pull toward this wild, rough country, this place where people could remake themselves, could escape their pasts and build new futures. They talked until the restaurant began to close, and Tucker walked her back to the boarding house through the cooling evening air. At the door, he took off his hat and held it in his hands, looking suddenly younger and uncertain. "I would like to see you again," he said, "if you are willing. I know I am just a ranch hand without much to offer, but I truly enjoyed tonight." "I enjoyed it too," Beatrice said softly, and it was the truth. She had enjoyed it far more than she had expected, far more than was probably wise. "Yes, I would like to see you again." Tucker's smile could have lit the entire street. "Next Sunday, we could take a picnic up into the hills if the weather holds." "That sounds lovely." He said good night and walked away whistling, and Beatrice climbed the stairs to her room feeling lighter than she had in years, and terrified by that very lightness. She knew better than to hope, knew better than to trust in happiness. But Tucker Dalton made her want to try, and that was perhaps the most frightening thing of all. Sunday arrived bright and clear, the September weather perfect for an outing. Tucker picked Beatrice up in a small wagon, and they headed out of town into the rolling hills that surrounded Idaho City. The landscape was beautiful in its rugged way, golden grasses and scattered pines, the air crisp and clean. Tucker had packed a lunch of fried chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apples, along with a jar of lemonade that had somehow stayed cool wrapped in damp cloths. They found a spot near a creek where cottonwood trees provided shade, and Tucker spread out a blanket. As they ate and talked, Beatrice felt years of tension beginning to ease from her shoulders. Tucker was easy to be with, his humor gentle and his manner relaxed. He told her about growing up in Ohio, about his family back east, about his dreams for the future. In turn, Beatrice found herself sharing more than she had intended, talking about her childhood in Missouri, her love of reading, her hopes of perhaps one day opening her own shop. "Why not?" Tucker asked when she mentioned it hesitantly. "You are clearly good with business. I saw how you handled that order for me, how you know exactly what is in stock and what people need. You would do well with your own place." "It takes money," Beatrice said. "More than I have or am likely to have any time soon." "But it is possible," Tucker insisted. "Out here, anything is possible if you are willing to work for it. That is what I love about this territory. You are not limited by what your father did or where you were born. You can make yourself into whoever you want to be." His optimism was infectious, and Beatrice found herself smiling. "You really believe that?" "Absolutely. Look at me. Farm boy from Ohio, now a cowboy in Idaho, saving up to buy my own spread. 5 years ago, I never would have imagined this life. But I took a chance, and here I am." "Do you ever regret it? Leaving your family, your home?" Tucker considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss them, but I do not regret coming west. This is where I belong. I knew it the moment I saw these mountains." Sometimes you just know when you have found your place. Beatrice understood that feeling. Despite her complicated past, despite her fears, Idaho City was beginning to feel like it might be that place for her. A place where she could belong, where she could build something lasting. As the afternoon wore on, they walked along the creek, skipping stones and talking about everything and nothing. Tucker pointed out animal tracks in the mud, explained the difference between various bird calls, showed her how to read the landscape the way a rancher did. Beatrice was fascinated by his knowledge, by the way he moved through this wild country with such confidence and ease. When he took her hand to help her across a particularly rocky section of creek bed, he did not let go on the other side, and Beatrice did not pull away. His hand was calloused and strong, and the warmth of his touch sent a flutter through her that she had not felt in far too long. They walked hand in hand back to the picnic spot, and when Tucker helped her up into the wagon for the ride home, his hands lingered at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for today," Beatrice said as they rode back toward town in the golden late afternoon light. "I cannot remember the last time I felt so peaceful." "Thank you for coming," Tucker replied. "I was worried you might find me dull. I am not much for fancy words or city manners." "I have had my fill of fancy words," Beatrice said with more bitterness than she intended. "They generally mean nothing." Tucker glanced at her curiously but did not press. "Then I will just promise to be honest with you, always. No pretty lies, just the truth." "That would be refreshing," Beatrice murmured. They began seeing each other regularly after that. Tucker would come into town on his days off, and they would walk together, have dinner, sit on the boarding house porch and talk as evening fell. Beatrice found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and worried her. She was falling for him, she could feel it happening, and she did not know how to stop it or even if she wanted to. It was late October, the air turning crisp with the promise of winter, when Tucker first kissed her. They were standing on the boarding house porch, saying goodnight after an evening walk, and he had been telling her a funny story about a stubborn calf. Beatrice had been laughing, her face tilted up toward his, and Tucker had gone suddenly quiet. The laughter faded from his expression, replaced by something intense and tender. "Beatrice," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." The words were simple, direct, pure Tucker. "I know we have not known each other long, but I cannot help how I feel. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are strong and smart and kind, and every moment I spend with you makes me want to be a better man. I am not asking you to say it back. I just needed you to know." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. She wanted to say it back, wanted to throw her arms around him and confess that she felt the same way. But the words stuck in her throat, blocked by years of disappointment and the weight of secrets she had not yet shared. Tucker saw her struggle and misunderstood it. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "I did not mean to pressure you. Forget I said anything." "No," Beatrice managed. "No, Tucker, you do not understand. I feel the same way. But there are things about me you do not know, things that might change how you feel." "Nothing could change how I feel," Tucker said firmly. "You say that now." Beatrice took a shaky breath. "Tucker, I have not been entirely honest with you about my past." He waited, patient and steady, and Beatrice forced herself to continue. "I told you I was widowed. That is true. My first husband died in a mining accident in Kansas 5 years ago. His name was Robert, and he was a good man. His death nearly destroyed me." She paused, gathering courage. "But there were 2 others after him. 2 more marriages. One ended in divorce because he was a drunk who became violent. The other ended when I discovered he already had a wife in California. I am not just a widow, Tucker. I have been married 3 times, and all 3 ended in disaster. I am not some innocent maiden. I am a woman with a complicated, messy history, and I understand if that changes things between us." She finished speaking and stood there, heart pounding, waiting for Tucker's reaction. She had seen this moment before, the shift in a man's expression when he learned the truth about her. The judgment, the disgust, the withdrawal. She braced herself for it, already feeling her heart beginning to crack. But Tucker just looked at her steadily, those green eyes calm and unwavering. Then, to her absolute shock, he grinned. It was not a mocking grin or a cruel one. It was warm and genuine and full of something that looked remarkably like affection. "4th time is the charm, darling," he said. Beatrice stared at him. "What? 4th time is the charm," Tucker repeated. He took her hands in his, holding them gently. "Beatrice, I do not care about your past marriages. I care about you right here, right now. You survived 3 terrible situations and came through them strong enough to start over in a new place. That does not make you damaged. It makes you brave." "You do not understand," Beatrice protested. "People will talk. They will say I am bad luck, that I drove those men away, that there is something wrong with me." "Let them talk," Tucker said. "I make my own judgments. And what I see is a woman who refused to stay in situations that were wrong for her, who kept hoping for something better even after being hurt multiple times. That takes courage. I admire that." Beatrice felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "You really mean that?" "Every word." Tucker reached up and gently wiped her tears away with his thumbs. "I love you, Beatrice Emerson. Your past does not scare me. What scares me is the thought of not having you in my future." And then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Beatrice kissed him back, her hands clutching his shirt, all her fears and doubts temporarily swept away by the tenderness of the moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "Say you will give us a chance," he murmured. "Say you will let yourself believe that this time can be different." "I am afraid," Beatrice whispered. "I am so afraid of being hurt again." "I know. But I promise you I will spend every day trying to prove that you are safe with me. I am not perfect, Beatrice. I am going to make mistakes. But I will never deliberately hurt you, and I will never give up on us." She believed him. Against all logic and experience, she believed him. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will give us a chance." Tucker's joy was palpable. He picked her up and spun her around right there on the porch, making her laugh and shush him simultaneously so as not to wake the other boarders. When he set her down, he was still grinning like a fool. "I am going to marry you, Beatrice Emerson," he announced. "Maybe not tomorrow or next month, but someday when you are ready, I am going to make you my wife." "That is a bold assumption," Beatrice said, but she was smiling. "Not an assumption, a promise." Tucker kissed her again, quick and firm. "Fourth time is the charm, darling, you will see." Over the following months, Tucker proved true to his word. He courted Beatrice with patient dedication, showing up consistently, following through on his promises, demonstrating day after day that he was worthy of her trust. They spent Sundays together, taking long walks or riding out to the ranch where Tucker worked, so he could show her the cattle and horses he cared for. The ranch owner, Mr. Reynolds, was a gruff but fair man who clearly valued Tucker's work and treated Beatrice with friendly respect when Tucker introduced her winter came to Idaho City, bringing snow and cold that kept people close to their fires. Tucker would come into the mercantile bundled in his heavy coat, his cheeks red from the wind, just to see Beatrice for a few minutes and warm his hands around the stove. They would talk quietly while she worked, and those brief visits became the highlights of her days. It was during one of those visits in late January that trouble found them. A man walked into the mercantile, a stranger to Beatrice but clearly someone Tucker recognized. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Tucker straightened, his whole body going tense. "Dalton," the man said. He was shorter than Tucker but broader, with a mean cast to his features and eyes that held no warmth. "Heard you were working around here." "Garrett," Tucker replied evenly. "What are you doing in Idaho City, passing through? Thought I would look up an old friend." Garrett's smile was unpleasant. He glanced at Beatrice with open speculation. "You going to introduce me to the lady?" "No," Tucker said flatly. "You have no business here, Garrett. Move along." Garrett's expression hardened. "That is no way to treat an old partner. We worked together for 3 years down in Nevada. Does not that count for something? You lost any claim to my friendship when you ran out on that poker debt and left me to face those men alone," Tucker said, his voice cold in a way Beatrice had never heard before. "I spent 2 weeks working off what you owed because they thought we were partners. So no, it does not count for anything." Beatrice watched this exchange with growing concern. She could see the tension in Tucker's shoulders, the barely leashed anger in his stance. This Garrett person was trouble, that much was clear, still holding a grudge about that, Garrett laughed. "It was just business, Dalton, no hard feelings." "Get out," Tucker said. "Now." Garrett held up his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, fine, but I am staying at the saloon for a few days. Maybe we can have a drink, talk about old times." "Not interested." Tucker did not move until Garrett had left the mercantile, the door swinging shut behind him. Then he let out a long breath and turned to Beatrice. "I am sorry you had to see that." "Who was he?" Beatrice asked. "Someone I used to work with a long time ago, someone I wish had stayed in my past." Tucker rubbed the back of his neck, clearly agitated. "He is bad news, Beatrice. If you see him around, stay away from him. You think he means trouble? I think Garrett never does anything without an angle. He wants something, and I do not trust him. Tucker looked at her seriously. Promise me you will be careful. Beatrice promised, but she could not shake the uneasy feeling that settled over her. She had thought they were past the hard parts, that they could simply focus on building their life together. But apparently the past had a way of catching up with everyone. Her instincts proved correct 3 days later when Garrett approached her on the street as she was walking home from work. Tucker was out at the ranch, and Beatrice was alone, which Garrett had clearly counted on. Mrs. Emerson, he said, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness. Might I have a word? Beatrice wanted to refuse, but they were on a public street with people around. She could not see the harm in hearing what he wanted. Make it quick. I understand you are courting Tucker Dalton. Might I ask what he has told you about his past? That is none of your concern, Beatrice said coldly. Maybe not. But did he tell you about the incident in Nevada? About how he nearly killed a man in a fight over cards? Beatrice felt her stomach clench. I do not believe you. It is true. Ask him yourself. Tucker has a temper when he is pushed, and he was pushed that night. Put a gambler in the hospital for 2 weeks. Only reason he did not hang for it is the gambler admitted to cheating. Garrett leaned in closer. I am not saying Tucker is a bad man, but he is not the saint he pretends to be either. Thought you should know what you are getting into. He walked away before Beatrice could respond, leaving her standing on the street feeling shaken. She did not want to believe Garrett, did not want to think that Tucker had been hiding something significant from her. But then again, she had hidden her own past. Maybe everyone in the West had secrets they would rather keep buried. That evening, when Tucker came to call, Beatrice asked him about it directly. She had learned the hard way that honesty was the only foundation worth building on. Did you almost kill a man in Nevada? Tucker went very still. Garrett told you about that. Is it true? He was quiet for a long moment, and Beatrice felt her heart sinking. Then Tucker sighed and nodded. Yes, it is true. It was 4 years ago, before I came to Idaho. I was working at a ranch near Virginia City, and I got involved in a card game. I am not much of a gambler, but it was a social thing, something to do on a Saturday night. This man, the gambler, was cheating. Everyone knew it, but nobody wanted to call him out because he was connected to some dangerous people. But he pushed too far, took money from a friend of mine who could not afford to lose it. I confronted him, he went for his gun, and I reacted. I beat him badly, Beatrice. Put him in bed for weeks. It is one of the things I am most ashamed of, losing control like that. Beatrice studied his face, seeing the genuine remorse there. Why did you not tell me? For the same reason you did not tell me about your marriages right away. Some things are hard to talk about, but I should have told you. I promised you honesty, and I should have kept that promise fully. He met her eyes. I am not that man anymore, Beatrice. I learned from that mistake. I learned to walk away from situations before they escalate, but I cannot change what I did. Did he deserve it? The beating. Does anyone deserve that? He was a cheat and a coward, yes. But I could have handled it differently. I should have handled it differently. Beatrice thought about her own past, her own mistakes and poor choices. Who was she to judge Tucker for one violent moment in a rough world? Thank you for telling me the truth. Tucker looked relieved. Does this change things between us? No, Beatrice said slowly. No, I do not think it does. We all have things in our past we wish we could change. What matters is who we are now and who we are trying to become. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. I love you. I would never hurt you, Beatrice. Never. I know, she whispered, and she did. Whatever else Tucker Dalton might be, he was not a man who would harm someone he loved. She believed that with absolute certainty. Garrett left town a few days later, and life returned to its comfortable rhythm. Winter gave way to early spring, And with the changing season came changes in Beatrice and Tucker's relationship as well. They had grown deeply comfortable with each other, their connection deepening into something solid and true. Tucker had started talking more seriously about the future, about his plans to buy land, about what kind of house he would build. It was April, the hills turning green with new growth, when Tucker came into town with a nervous energy that Beatrice recognized immediately. He asked her to take a walk with him after she finished work, and she agreed with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. She knew what was coming. She had seen it in his eyes for weeks now, the question he was working up the courage to ask. They walked out to a spot overlooking the town, where the view stretched out over the valley. The evening light painted everything gold, and somewhere nearby a meadowlark was singing. Tucker took both her hands in his and took a deep breath. "Beatrice, I know I said I would wait until you were ready, and I have tried to be patient, but I cannot wait any longer to ask you this." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. "I love you more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. You make me want to be better, do better, build something that lasts. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me spend the rest of my life proving that fourth time is the charm?" Beatrice looked at the ring, at Tucker's hopeful face, and felt all her remaining defenses crumble. She had been so afraid of this moment, so certain that happiness was not meant for her. But looking at Tucker, seeing the love and hope and certainty in his expression, she could not hold onto her fear any longer. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Tucker, I will marry you." His whoop of joy probably carried all the way back to town. He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with such enthusiasm that they both nearly toppled over, laughing and holding each other. When they finally pulled apart, both grinning like fools, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he said. "I promise you, Beatrice, you will never regret this." "I already do not regret it," she replied, and it was the truth. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future. They set the wedding for June, wanting to give themselves time to prepare properly. Tucker was saving every penny toward buying land, but he insisted on doing this right. Beatrice found herself caught up in preparations, working with Mrs. Cooper and Sarah to make a wedding dress, planning a small ceremony at the church with a reception at the hotel. The women of Idaho City had embraced her fully, and their enthusiasm for the wedding was touching. Not everyone was pleased, however. Rumors about Beatrice's past marriages had inevitably surfaced, and there were those in town who whispered that she was bad luck, that Tucker was making a mistake. Beatrice tried not to let the gossip bother her, but there were nights when doubt crept back in, when she wondered if maybe they were right. Tucker would have none of it. When someone made a snide comment within his hearing at the mercantile, he confronted them directly. Beatrice has been through more than most people could survive, and she came through it with her kindness and strength intact. Any man would be lucky to have her. I am the fortunate one here, not her. His fierce defense warmed Beatrice's heart and silenced most of the critics. Those who persisted in their disapproval were simply avoided. Tucker and Beatrice had each other and their friends, and that was enough. The week before the wedding, Tucker came into town with exciting news. Mr. Reynolds, the ranch owner, was retiring and moving back east to live with his daughter. He had offered to sell Tucker a portion of the ranch land at a price Tucker could afford with his savings and a reasonable loan from the bank. It was everything Tucker had been working toward, his dream finally within reach. "We will have our own place," he told Beatrice, his excitement infectious. 300 acres of good grazing land, a creek running through it, timber for building. "We can build a house, start a small herd, make something real." "It sounds wonderful," Beatrice said, caught up in his vision. "When would we move out there?" "After the wedding. We can stay in the ranch house temporarily while I build our place. It will be hard work, but we will do it together." Tucker grabbed her hands. "This is really happening, Beatrice. We are really building a life together." She kissed him, pouring all her love and hope into the gesture. "Yes, we really are." The wedding day arrived bright and beautiful, a perfect June morning with a clear blue sky. Beatrice dressed carefully in the gown she and her friends had made, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Sarah helped her arrange her hair, weaving in small wildflowers that Tucker had picked the previous evening. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Beatrice barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, truly happy, in a way she had not been in years. The church was full when she arrived, seemingly the entire town turning out for the occasion. Beatrice walked down the aisle alone, having no father to give her away, but she held her head high. She had made this choice herself, and she was proud of it. Tucker waited at the altar in his best suit, looking nervous and handsome and so full of love that Beatrice felt her eyes prick with tears. When she reached him and he took her hands, he mouthed, "Beautiful," and she had to bite her lip to keep from crying. The ceremony was traditional, the pastor speaking about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. When it came time for the vows, Tucker spoke as clearly and firmly, never taking his eyes from Beatrice's face. She repeated her own vows, her voice shaking slightly with emotion, promising to love and honor him all the days of her life. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor said. "You may kiss your bride." Tucker kissed her gently, sweetly, and the church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and Beatrice felt lighter than air. She had done it. She had taken the risk, made the leap of faith, and it felt right in a way nothing had before. The reception at the hotel was lively and warm, full of good food and friendly faces. People toasted the happy couple, and even those who had been skeptical seemed won over by the obvious love between the bride and groom. Tucker never left Beatrice's side, his hand always at her waist or holding hers, as if he could not quite believe she was really his. As evening fell and the party began to wind down, Tucker and Beatrice slipped away to the boarding house to collect Beatrice's belongings. Tucker had arranged for them to spend their wedding night at the hotel in a proper room, a luxury they both appreciated. Tomorrow they would head out to the ranch to begin their new life, but tonight was just for them. In the privacy of their hotel room, with the noise of the celebration fading below, Tucker pulled Beatrice close and just held her for a long moment. "I love you, Mrs. Dalton," he murmured against her hair. "I love you too," Beatrice replied, marveling at how natural it felt to say those words, to be in his arms. This was her husband, her partner, her future. Fourth time is the charm, Tucker had said, and she was beginning to believe he was right. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a coming together of two people who had found each other against all odds. Tucker was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure Beatrice felt cherished and safe. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Beatrice felt a peace she had never known before. This was what marriage was supposed to be, she realized. Not a transaction or a trap, but a true partnership built on love and respect. The next morning, they loaded Beatrice's belongings into Tucker's wagon and headed out to the ranch. The ride took them through beautiful country, and Beatrice felt her spirits lift even higher as they traveled. This was her home now, this wild Idaho landscape with its endless sky and rugged beauty. The ranch house was a sturdy log structure that Mr. Reynolds had built 20 years earlier. It was basic but comfortable, with a large main room, a bedroom, and a kitchen. Tucker carried Beatrice over the threshold, making her laugh, and they spent the afternoon settling her things and making the space feel like theirs. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Tucker worked the land, tending the cattle he was slowly acquiring, repairing fences, planning where to build their permanent house. Beatrice kept the house, tended a large garden, and began to explore ways she might contribute financially. She had not given up her dream of having her own business, and she started making plans for a small enterprise selling preserves and baked goods to the hotel in Idaho City. Life was not easy. The work was hard and the days were long. But Beatrice found a satisfaction in it that she had never experienced before. She and Tucker were building something together, creating a life from the ground up. They talked and laughed and worked side by side, and their love deepened with each passing day. By autumn, Tucker had begun construction on their house, working in his spare time with help from neighboring ranchers. The house would be small initially, but well built, with room to expand as their family grew. That was something they had started talking about, the possibility of children. Beatrice was 33 years old, not too old but not young either. If they wanted a family, they should not wait too long. It was in October, almost a year exactly from when she had first met Tucker, that Beatrice realized her monthly courses were late. She waited a few more days to be certain, not wanting to raise Tucker's hopes only to disappoint him. But when 2 weeks had passed with no sign, she allowed herself to believe it might be true. She told Tucker that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He had been talking about whether to expand the herd in the spring, but Beatrice was barely listening, working up her courage. "Tucker," she interrupted gently, "I need to tell you something." He turned to her, immediately attentive. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. In fact, something might be very right." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I think I am going to have a baby." Tucker's eyes went wide. "You think? You are not certain as I can be without seeing a doctor." "My courses are late. I have been feeling tired and slightly queasy in the mornings. All the signs point to it." Tucker let out a whoop that startled the horses in the nearby corral. He picked Beatrice up and spun her around, then immediately set her down, looking worried. "I am sorry, should I not have done that? I do not want to hurt you or the baby." Beatrice laughed, feeling giddy with joy and relief. "I am not made of glass, but perhaps save the spinning for after the baby is born." "We are having a baby," Tucker said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy about it?" Beatrice asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Beatrice, this is everything. You are everything." He kissed her thoroughly, his hands cradling her face. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be a family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Beatrice bloomed with it. She felt better than she had in years, full of energy and purpose. Tucker was hilariously protective, trying to prevent her from doing anything he deemed too strenuous, which led to several good-natured arguments about what she was and was not capable of. Beatrice had been working hard her entire life, and she was not about to stop now just because she was expecting. By spring, her pregnancy was unmistakable, her belly round and firm. The baby was active, kicking and moving, and Tucker loved to put his hand on her stomach and feel those movements. He talked to the baby constantly, telling stories and making promises about the life they would have together. The house was finished in April, just in time. It was a fine structure, solid and well built, with 2 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a proper dining area, and a parlor. Tucker had even built a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides, giving them a place to sit and watch the world. They moved in with great ceremony, and Beatrice spent happy days arranging their furniture and making the space into a true home. She was hanging curtains in the nursery, 7 months along and moving more slowly than usual when the pain started. At first, she thought it was just the baby kicking more vigorously than usual, but the pains intensified, coming in waves that made her gasp and clutch the windowsill. "Tucker." She called, trying to keep her voice calm. "Tucker, I need you." He was there in seconds, having been working just outside. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. "The baby, but it is too early." "I know," Beatrice said through gritted teeth as another contraction hit. "But the baby does not seem to care about the timing. You need to get the doctor." Tucker looked torn between wanting to stay with her and needing to fetch help. "I do not want to leave you alone." "I will be fine," Beatrice assured him, though she was not at all certain that was true. "Go." Quickly. He settled her in their bedroom, then rode for town at a gallop. Beatrice lay on the bed, breathing through the contractions, trying not to panic. It was too early. She was not due for another 2 months. Babies born this early often did not survive, she knew that. "Please," she prayed silently. "Please let this baby be all right." The labor progressed quickly, too quickly. By the time Tucker returned with Dr. Morrison, Beatrice was fully in the grip of it, the pains coming one on top of another. The doctor examined her quickly and nodded. "This baby is coming whether we are ready or not," he said. "Tucker, I need you to help me. Beatrice, you are going to have to be strong." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Beatrice had never experienced anything like it, the all-consuming intensity of bringing a child into the world. Tucker stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement. She clung to him, drawing strength from his presence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn. The doctor worked quickly and then placed a tiny, squirming bundle in Beatrice's arms. "A boy," he announced. "Small but breathing. He is a fighter." Beatrice looked down at her son, so impossibly tiny, his skin red and wrinkled, his eyes scrunched shut. He was perfect. She felt tears streaming down her face as she counted his fingers and toes, marveling at the miracle of him. "He is beautiful," Tucker whispered, his own voice thick with emotion. "Look at him, Beatrice. He is beautiful." The doctor was more cautious. "He is very small, born too early." "The next few days will be critical. Keep him warm, keep him fed. If he can get through the first week, his chances improve significantly." Tucker and Beatrice barely slept for the next 7 days, taking turns holding their son against their skin to keep him warm, helping him nurse, watching over him with anxious vigilance. Beatrice had never known fear like this, the terror that she might lose this precious life they had created. She prayed more in those days than she had in her entire life, bargaining with God, promising anything if he would just let her baby live. The baby, whom they had named Thomas after Tucker's father, was indeed a fighter. He was small and weak, but stubborn. He nursed well despite his size, and each day he seemed a little stronger. By the end of the first week, Dr. Morrison pronounced himself cautiously optimistic. By the end of the second week, Thomas was clearly thriving, gaining weight and growing stronger. Beatrice finally allowed herself to believe he would survive, and with that belief came a flood of love so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. This was her son, hers and Tucker's, their family, created out of love and hope and sheer determination. Thomas continued to thrive, growing from a tiny, fragile infant into a healthy baby. He had Tucker's green eyes and Beatrice's auburn hair, and a smile that could light up a room. Tucker was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son, talking to him, playing with him, already teaching him about the ranch, and the animals even though Thomas was far too young to understand. Beatrice watched them together and felt her heart overflow. This was what she had been searching for all along, this sense of belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be. Her 3 previous marriages had been mistakes, painful lessons on the road to finding Tucker. Fourth time is the charm, he had told her, and he had been absolutely right. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch prospered under Tucker's dedicated management. Beatrice's small business selling preserves and baked goods grew into something substantial, bringing in good money and giving her an outlet for her entrepreneurial spirit. Thomas grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler, then into a bright, talkative little boy who followed his father everywhere and chattered constantly to his mother. When Thomas was 3 years old, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, full-term and uncomplicated. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1883, a healthy baby girl with dark hair and Tucker's smile. They named her Rose, and she completed their family in a way Beatrice had not even realized was missing. Life was not perfect. There were droughts and lean years, sickness and setbacks. But through it all, Beatrice and Tucker faced everything together, their love providing a foundation that nothing could shake. They celebrated the good times and weathered the hard times, and their bond only grew stronger. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch and seemed destined to take it over someday. Rose was bright and determined, with a head for numbers that impressed even Mr. Henderson at the Mercantile when the family came to town. Beatrice often thought about her younger self, the woman who had arrived in Idaho City so weary and defeated, and marveled at how much had changed. It was their 20th wedding anniversary, June of 1899, when Beatrice found herself reflecting on everything they had built together. The ranch had expanded to over 1,000 acres. The house had been added onto several times and was now a spacious, comfortable home filled with memories. Thomas was 21 now, courting a nice girl from town. Rose was 17, planning to attend Teachers College in Boise the following year. Tucker found Beatrice on the porch that evening, watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. He sat beside her and took her hand, his touch still sending a flutter through her after all these years. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," Beatrice said. "How far we have come," Tucker smiled. "I told you fourth time would be the charm." "You did," Beatrice agreed. "I did not believe you at first, but I was right. You were absolutely right." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing past my mistakes to who I could be." "You did not need me to see that," Tucker said. "You were always strong, always brave. I just got to be the lucky man who stood beside you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the barn, Thomas was finishing evening chores. From inside the house came the sound of Rose practicing her piano, a skill Beatrice had insisted both children learn despite Tucker's initial skepticism about its practicality. This was her life, Beatrice thought. This beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary life. She had survived 3 failed marriages, heartbreak and loss and disappointment. But all of that had led her here, to this porch, this man, this family. She would not change a single thing because every step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to bring her home. "I love you," she said to Tucker, the words as easy now as breathing. "I love you too," he replied. "Always have, always will." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Beatrice felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, her purpose, her happiness. Fourth time had indeed been the charm, and she was grateful beyond words for the gift of this life, this love, this family. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Thomas married his sweetheart, Emily, and brought her to the ranch, where they built a small house on the eastern section of the property. The young couple's first child, a boy they named Tucker after his grandfather, arrived the following spring, making Beatrice and Tucker grandparents and filling them with renewed wonder. Rose did go to Teachers College in Boise, graduating with honors and returning to Idaho City to teach at the same school she had attended as a child. She eventually married as well, a young lawyer named Henry who treated her with the respect and affection that made Beatrice's heart glad. They settled in town, and Rose continued teaching, becoming a beloved figure in the community. Tucker and Beatrice grew older gracefully, their hair turning silver, their steps a bit slower, but their love as strong as ever. They handed over more of the ranch operations to Thomas, taking pleasure in watching him manage it with the same dedication Tucker had shown. They spent their days in quieter pursuits now, Beatrice with her garden and her preserves, Tucker with his horses and his grandchildren who adored him. On a warm summer evening in 1910, 32 years after that dusty day when Beatrice had first rolled into Idaho City, she and Tucker sat on their porch watching the sun set. They were surrounded by family now, Thomas and Emily and their 3 children, Rose and Henry visiting from town with their 2 daughters. The yard was full of laughter and the sound of children playing, and Beatrice felt her heart might burst from the fullness of it all. Tucker reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his 70 years. "Remember when I first asked you to dinner?" he said. Beatrice smiled. "I remember I was so nervous. I was terrified you would say no. I almost did. I was so sure I was done with men, done with trying." "Good thing you changed your mind." Tucker brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "Best decision I ever made asking you, best decision you ever made saying yes. 4th time really was the charm," Beatrice said softly. "Told you so," Tucker replied with that familiar grin that still made her heart skip. They sat together as the light faded, hands clasped, watching their family, their legacy, the life they had built together. Beatrice thought about the woman she had been, arriving in Idaho City with nothing but a broken heart and desperate hope. She had been married 3 times before Tucker, each marriage a failure that had left scars. But those scars had healed in Tucker's patient, steady love, and she had become someone stronger for having survived them. She would never regret the path that had led her here, not the pain or the mistakes or the long, lonely years. Because they had all been necessary to bring her to this moment, this life, this man who had seen past her history to her heart and had loved her faithfully through all the years since. As night fell, and the family eventually dispersed to their various homes, Tucker helped Beatrice inside. They moved slowly now, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But when Tucker pulled her close in their bedroom, when he kissed her good night as he had done every night for 32 years, Beatrice felt young again, felt the same flutter of excitement and contentment she had felt on their wedding night. "I love you, Beatrice Dalton," Tucker murmured. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Thank you for being patient with me, for waiting for me to believe." "You were always worth the wait," Tucker said, "always worth everything." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done for over 3 decades, 2 souls who had found each other in a wild, beautiful place and had built something lasting. Beatrice's last thought before sleep claimed her was one of profound gratitude. She had lived a full life, had known love in its truest form, had created a family and a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. 4th time had been the charm, just as Tucker had promised. And what a magnificent charm it had turned out to be.